Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to today's closing session, proudly and expertly delivered by Professor Herman Singh, the Chief Executive Officer at Future Advisory. Before I call upon the Professor for our closing discussion, a reminder that across social media, please do keep engaging and discussing the conversations, the plenaries that have been taking place throughout the course of the day, with the official hashtag being hashtag Pipc 2023. Now, the upcoming presentation delves into chasing new payment horizons together. And for this presentation, ladies and gentlemen, we welcome onto the stage Professor Herman Singh.
Thank you. Good afternoon, folks. Can we just give a big shout out to Vuyo, Gita, and Paza for an amazing conference? Thank you. Let's show them some love. Folks, I'm a professor, so if you're secretly WhatsApping, I will find out because nobody looks at their crotch and smiles. So I will be looking out in the audience. If I can just do one other thing, I've been struggling with a particular problem that concerns payments, and you're all payment specialists. So I'm going to give a copy of my book to whoever gives me the best answer to the following question. I don't actually know the answer to this question. And the question is, why is it that the word for money in India is paisa, and the word for money, and the currency in Spain and Mexico is peso, and the word for money in Kenya is pesa? I am pretty sure that there's a secret common word, and I would love to hear your thoughts on that. So please send that through to me. I was asked to talk about this. They asked me what my topic was. I looked at the name for the conference, and I said, oh yeah, this looks good. I'll talk about this. I mean, the concept of chasing horizons is illogical because the faster you run, the further away it gets from you. But I like the topic, and I want to just talk about some of the new things we need to focus on. I was so excited about this. In fact, yesterday morning at 10 o'clock, I was in Madrid. And I've traveled 24 hours just to get here. I landed here at 10 o'clock this morning. And so what I wanted to just talk about is a couple of things. I want to talk about how the payments environment is evolving. And look, I work in 20, 30 countries physically every year on exactly this problem. And I want to talk about customer centricity. I'll explain shortly why that comes up. And then I want to talk about what this means about the way that we work together, and I'll give you a few conclusions. And please, folks, if you have any questions, do load them onto Slido, and I'll address them as we go through it. So we know there are reasons that we need to transform, and you've seen slides like this. They really talk about the demands of real-time payments. We need better resilience. I mean, if I summarize all of this, what this is really saying is that the payments industry needs to simplify inside and differentiate outside. The inside of the industry is just too complicated. It's what I refer to as a cyber informal settlement. Right? If you look at any payment system in any country in the world, it's just spaghetti. And the challenge that you have is you're trying to re-engineer this in a world that's moving at light speed. And I'm going to share with you how fast business is evolving and why this is a real challenge. At the same time, regulations are increasing. In fact, if you look at the cost of compliance in financial services, the entire global financial services industry, it comes to something like $6 or $7 trillion. If you add the cost of all the staff in all the banks and all the insurance companies and all the lending institutions all over the world, and you look at the projects that are running and the cost of running these systems, it's $7 trillion. In fact, the calculation is if compliance was a country, it would be the fourth biggest country in the world. That is the cost of compliance globally. And the problem is every time we implement new rules, nobody removes old rules. Now, this is really becoming a challenge. And the real issue is that there's a cliff coming. It's a cliff that most people don't see. It's an invisible cliff, and I call it the zero cliff. And the zero cliff is occurring because of digital technology. Digital technology is doing four things. It's making the cost of capturing data free. So I can capture data for nothing. My watch is capturing terabytes of data as I'm giving this presentation. The cost of sending this data is free. The cost of storing this data is free, and the cost of processing this data is free. And the challenge that you have is this creates quite serious changes in the world, which is going to affect every industry in the world. And I refer to this as the 7-0 problem. And the 7-0 problem really says that the first problem that you've got is if you are making things that are digital, the cost of making another one is zero. If I generate a card, a virtual card, the cost of that is zero. If I create another virtual card, the cost of the second card is zero. There might be some processing costs, but they're trivial. So the actual cost of another copy of Rihanna's song, Work, 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 is zero. The cost of another video stream of Avatar is zero. The cost of another digital copy of my book is zero. There's no cost to creating another copy of something. Which means that software-defined products are really growing. We've got digital versions of everything, and I know this to be true because every one of you has hundreds of them sitting on your cell phones. You call them apps. Calculators used to be physical things. Maps used to be physical things. Books used to be physical things. We've moved from atoms to bits. And the reason is I can't copy an atom, but I can copy a bit. So software-defined products are just taking over the entire world, and we increasingly are not using atoms, we're using bits. Now, the big advantage of moving from atoms to bits is the second zero. And the second zero is that it costs me money to move atoms because atoms have friction. But it costs me nothing to move bits. Therefore, the delivery cost for all of these products that we're making is zero. Because zero delivery cost. So just think about this. And the third zero is zero delivery time. I can get it to you anywhere in the world for nothing, instantaneously. So think about this. I can make another copy of something for free. I can deliver it anywhere in the world for free, and I can do it instantaneously. Well, any industry in the world that can be digitized is going to get digitized, because those three zeros make a very compelling business case. But it doesn't stop there, because if you look at these systems, thanks to digital rage, it's called outrage, right? We've basically gotten rid of downtime. It's almost unheard of for anything to go down. So downtime is dropping globally. It's rare that WhatsApp or Facebook actually goes down. At the same time, if you go and look at most retailers now and you look at most apps, it doesn't matter whether you go to the app or the website or the kiosk, there's zero channel difference. It's exactly the same. Omni-channel is actually becoming a reality. Doesn't matter what channel I'm working on, it's the same. The next point is I can apply for something with zero click. I've traveled through 8 airports, I think, in the last couple of days. And every airport I landed at, it said, click to connect to Wi-Fi. Now, in the old days, I had to wait for an SMS to come from South Africa that never came. And the reality is now I can just click, do you agree to go online? Do you accept terms and conditions? And I read all 400 pages in 3 seconds, accepted it, and I was online. So zero application time. I can actually pay just by double-clicking my phone, looking at the phone, and tapping it. I've paid. It's zero application time. Finally, zero human contact. It turns out that most people, if you think about it, the thing that they dread most, actually more than dying, is actually public speaking, which means at a funeral, most people would rather be in the casket than actually giving the eulogy. So the point is that humans actually don't want to talk to humans, turns out. Who knew? And so these 7 zeros are actually quite important because they are fundamentally transforming digital business. This is going to have a huge impact in the world of payments. The other thing that's having a big impact in the world of payments is Web 3.0. And Web 3.0 is bringing with it something really interesting in terms of authentication. We've all heard of one-factor authentication, two-factor authentication. We're now moving to, wait for it, it's like those Gillette shavers. You go from 1 blade to 2 blade. I am now launching 6 blades. 6 blades, 6-blade authentication. Sorry. I'm now launching, here we go, sorry. 6-factor authentication. In other words, I can now authenticate you based on what you have, what you know, that's 2 factors, what you are, your face, digital, biometrics, where you are, I can now use location, how you are moving, because you've got a particular way in which you are moving, and your phone has an accelerometer. So I can tell if it's you, because if you had a limp, you'll still have that limp going forward, and the phone will pick it up. And how you behave, because I know how you move your finger on the screen, and I know how you move the mouse on the screen. So I can actually tell who you are. Multiple ways, and it doesn't even stop here. So the point I'm making is we're moving to a world where very quickly the issue of authentication and authorization are going to be solved in a very, very quick way. So this, again, is going to have a huge impact. And this is all removing friction. Think about these last 2 slides, the 7 zeros and the 6 factors of authentication. They're all about frictionless business. Think about what I said about zero cost to copy, zero cost to deliver, zero latency, zero effort to authenticate. We are removing friction. We want 0 click to pay. In fact, if you go to Domino's, you can actually order a pizza using an app called the 0 click app. You don't even have to click. It knows exactly what pizza you want. And it knows where to send it to. And it knows which card to charge it to. And it knows what you're going to drink with it. It's actually astonishing. You should go play with that app. So basically, we're moving to a world where all the friction is getting taken out. The most friction-full experience is payments. Right? So the payments world is moving from VUCA to Barney. What is Barney? We all love 4-letter acronyms. I thought I'd introduce a new one. So we're moving from a world that's volatile. Volatile is creating brittle organizations. The fact that the world's changing so much is creating brittleness in organizations. The fact that there's so much of uncertainty is creating anxiety in organizations and industries. The fact that there's so much of complexity is creating non-linear change. And what that means is that change doesn't seem to happen, and then suddenly it happens. 2 days ago, another war started out of nowhere. No one saw this thing coming, right? It's non-linear. Non-linear means cause and effect don't seem to be linked to each other. I just couldn't have predicted this. And ambiguity means a lot of what's happening is incomprehensible. I don't actually understand what's happening anymore. So this is having a pretty significant impact in the payment space. And so if you look at some of the big trends that are coming our way, and if you look at the slide, look at number 1 and number 2. That talks about the horizontal axis is business impact, and the vertical axis is ease of adoption. You can see that the big issues that we're focusing on are next generation payment methods. We're looking at payments 4.x, digital identity, and the way in which we've got direct-to-consumer products happening. And a lot of disintermediation, decoupling, and unbundling, all of which is fundamentally changing commerce, but importantly, it's going to have a huge impact on the payment space. So the challenge for the payment industry is we've previously focused on the blue part of this, on the blue part of the slide. I'm sorry, on the purple part of the slide, because we've said we need to be resilient. We need to manage risk and keep risk low. We've got to make sure that we've got certainty, we've got operational efficiency. We've got to have control. We've got to have certainty. We've got to have standardization. And if you look at that purple side, that's the payment industry in every country in the world. That's their mantra. That's how we run payments globally. The challenge is we still need to do this. And the question is, how do we do this? How do we value this, but how do we value the blue side more? Because that's what's being called for here. We need agility and resilience. We need innovativeness and managing risk. We need to be adaptable and have certainty. And you can see in many cases, the stuff in blue is almost the exact opposite of the stuff in purple. Now, why am I saying this? Because this is a paradox. How do we build this? And the reason I was in Madrid is I took a client from Saudi Arabia to Madrid to show this insurance company in Saudi Arabia, a healthcare insurance company, why buying a hospital was a very good idea. And in my opinion, the fact that Discovery hasn't bought Mediclinic amazes me. Now, most of you are probably looking at me going, why would you do that? And the answer is that the biggest problem in many insurance companies is healthcare inflation. And the only way they can manage healthcare inflation is to buy a hospital. Now that, I guess many of you probably would never have guessed that that was going to happen, but I've got a client in Ireland that I'm working with that already has a hospital. So in other words, the world is changing so unusually in ways that most of us would never have guessed. So it's really important that we understand that we have to do both things. We can't give up on this stuff in purple, But at the same time that we've got to start embracing the stuff in blue. Now, what's driving all of this? Well, the first thing that's driving this is clearly, and we've spoken about this a lot in the payment industry, we're moving into a world of business ecosystems. Now, what I want to do is just unpack for you what the consequences of this are. Because it really changes payments in ways many of us haven't really considered. So in any ecosystem, what you've got is you've got an orchestrator who orchestrates what's happening, and maybe it's PASA or PIB that's orchestrating, maybe it's Amazon, maybe it's Apple with their App Store. And there's normally some kind of proposition, and what you want to do is you want to align the proposition with the orchestrator, and if you get this right, then you've got ecosystems that grow very, very quickly. In fact, in my opinion, if you look at the Microsoft ecosystem, the Microsoft ecosystem is 10 times bigger than Microsoft, because everyone looks at Microsoft's revenue. I said, that's completely the wrong way to look at Microsoft. The way you must look at Microsoft is, what are people building with Microsoft? How many products are there that run on Microsoft that Microsoft doesn't make revenue with, but they actually built on Microsoft? And go and look at the revenue generated from Apple apps. Don't just look at Apple, right? Because Apple's hardware is one piece of it, and Apple makes money out of the transactions. But go and look at the value of the ecosystem. Right, so if you get this right, the ecosystem is enormous, and if you start doing math that way, you start understanding that actually many of these ecosystems are bigger than entire countries. So this is now turning into a non-zero-sum game, because what it means is a zero-sum game says if you win something, I lose something. And actually a non-zero-sum game says actually we can both win at the same time. Right? It felt for me that last night Fiji and Argentina were trying to work on that. So a non-zero-sum game basically means you've got a business arrangement where two entities come together and you create more value than you would have been able to create individually. So for example, Apple staff members are not really very good at making music, I've been told. But Apple was very good at building an app store. So what they said is, we'll build the app store, you build the music, together we'll create distribution, and we'll build, and they've completely transformed the music business. So the music business, which was dying, suddenly is growing at 30-40% per annum, because the music industry got together with Apple, they built an app, Apple built the app store, and suddenly they've created something that's much bigger than either of them could have done alone. Now the payment ecosystem is actually, not only is the payment ecosystem incredibly complex, because you've got cross-sector, cross-industry, cross-value chain, cross-enterprise. The payment ecosystem is very, very complex, right? It cuts across everything. There's nothing in our life that doesn't involve a payment. Even charity involves a payment. And so not only is it complex, but the actual configuration is changing from pure transaction ecosystems with central hubs to a world where we are now moving from centralized to decentralized to distributed, right? So in other words, centralized is you've got one operating center, BankServe, for example. Decentralized might be Standard Bank saying, well, I'm going to run out of 4 or 5 different data centers, or Amazon Cloud saying, I'll have 5 different ways of locations for you to put your data center in, to where we are in the distributed network where Bitcoin, I mean, listen to this sentence, Bitcoin cannot be stopped. If somebody said, I'm going to make Bitcoin illegal, it is physically impossible to shut Bitcoin down. Just think about that. Because of the number of nodes, there's something like 12,000 nodes connected to Bitcoin the last time I actually checked. Now, you have to find these nodes and shut each of them down. That's almost impossible. So in other words, you're moving to a world where there's about $1.5 trillion worth of payments going through cryptocurrency, running through nodes that are completely distributed. You can't shut this thing down. And you also can't hack this thing because it's so distributed. So the payment ecosystem is going through this very, very dramatic change. Now, that's the technical stuff. What I want to now do is home in on customer centricity, because the word customer, I was only here from about 11 o'clock today, 12 o'clock today. I don't think I heard the word customer much. I heard the word industry, standardization, integration, digital transformation, harmonization, APIs. That's a lot of what I heard about was a whole bunch of people with their arms around each other singing Kumbaya, looking inward. Where was the customer? He was running around the outside, trying to get in. We were all standing like this with our back to the customer because we thought we better get ready for the second half of this rugby game. Now, the reason this is important is while we are doing this, other people are taking a very customer-centric approach in terms of payments. And I want to talk about that. So customer centricity is about looking at an end-to-end customer proposition throughout the entire customer journey. It's not just about saying, oh, I just want to solve one part of this. If you go to a fuel station in South Africa, you can fill fuel, you can fill up your tires, you can fill up your stomach, you can fill up your children, you can fill up your cell phone, you can fill up your fireplace, you can fill up your freezer, you can fill up your fridge, you can fill up your cooler box. Right? So a filling station in South Africa fills up everything. Right? Now, that's the way we've got to think about this, because payments, like petrol, like fuel, some Americans in the audience, like gas, right, is a grudge purchase. I don't know anyone in the world who wakes up going, yes, I'm going to do banking today. Never met that person, probably needs to be psychologically evaluated. Nobody wakes up saying, yes, I got to the payment part of the transaction. This is so exciting. Nobody does that, right? I have forgotten my PIN number on my bank card because I haven't used my PIN number, because I haven't needed it, because with Apple Pay, it's double click, pay, touch, go. No PIN. Now, I'm going to forget my PIN. I can tell you now, your call centers are going to fall over because of how frictionless that's become. So the point I'm making is we tend to look at payments as a very strategic thing that's very important, but actually, most human beings want payments to just disappear, which is why I loved e-tolls. I'm probably the only South African who loved it because I could pay without even thinking. I drove right through it. It went ping, money's gone, didn't even pay. I loved it. Embedded payments. So that's what people want. We don't want friction. A payment is a friction-full process. So the challenge that we have is that actually what's starting to happen is we're starting to realize that payments is becoming a differentiator. And that as companies change their offerings, they change the way they operate, they are leveraging payments to create a differentiator. Now, most of you, who was your first internet service provider, and why did you get internet the first time? The only reason you got internet was because you needed email. Think about the killer app that made the internet compulsory. What was the first thing you did with the internet? It was email. In fact, many of you, your email address was linked to your internet service provider. It was either Hotmail or AOL or MWeb at mweb.com. Your email address was named after the person that gave you your internet access. So in other words, what started out as a differentiator, which is email, is how ISPs differentiated themselves. We paid for an email address. We paid for that. Today it's free. So we need to understand that what's likely to happen in the long run is I'm going to make my money somewhere else. Actually, payments should be free. If I don't pay to send an email, what's the difference between payments and an email? They're the same thing. I've got to log in. I've got to create an instruction. I've got to have a recipient. I'm the sender. I've got to maybe put some information into this thing, press send, and hopefully the other person gets it in a secure way. And it's hopefully non-repudiatable. You say you didn't got it? Well, I'll just check. So, and hopefully it mustn't be intercepted. Now, that's free. Now, you can't argue that, oh, the settlement is very expensive, because the challenge you have is eventually even settlements becoming free. So, what's starting to happen is payments are becoming a differentiator, and we are likely to see more and more large companies starting to offer it for free. And it's now becoming a real contributor to growth, because I'm more likely to pay if it's easier to pay. One of the biggest problems with e-commerce, for example, is the abandonment rate of shopping carts. By the way, the reason I'm walking up and down is to make the cameraman's job as difficult as possible. And is he keeping up with me? I'm not looking up there, but just let me know if I should just duck. I've been watching these Springbok wingers. They're really very good. I'm trying to lose this guy. He keeps tracking me. I do feel like I'm being stalked. So payments are now becoming a driver of profitability in this industry. And I'd like to share with you how, because what we don't appreciate is actually payments follow commerce. So we look at payments as if it's a thing on its own. Payments are not a thing on its own. It's like trying to sell tires. You know, if you want tires, you have to have a wheel. If you want wheels, you have to have a car. If you want to sell more wheels, you better sell more cars. You are the wheels. And so what's really important to understand is what's driving the payment industry is the commerce industry. And we almost never hear people in payments talk about commerce. And yes, commerce is the biggest driver of payments. And if you're not following where commerce is going, you don't know where to take payments to. And this is what's starting to happen. We've got social commerce, live commerce, you've got blockchain, digital currencies, you've got embedded payments. Web3 is going to hopefully transform the world. You've got the metaverse. I don't know how many of these are going to work out. And it doesn't matter. Because the important thing is, I'm going to give you examples that have nothing to do with these, that are going to show you how as commerce changes, payments are changing, and major payment companies in the world are absolutely in a panic. Because they know that what's going to happen is if the payment industry, if the commerce industry changes sufficiently, it's going to fundamentally change the shape of competition in the payments industry. So what are we doing? Well, this is what Walmart's doing. Walmart says, well, I can scan and go. That's actually quite clever. Right? So I can basically take a trolley, take a picture of what's in my trolley. It automatically figures out what's there, charges it to my card. That's quite clever. But remember what I said to you, nobody's going to wake up and go, wow, that's pretty cool. I'm going to go to Walmart and go try this out. Right? I'm going to go and buy a couple of things because this is so much fun. Right? No one's ever said that, and that's never going to happen. So you should think of this as payments are not even an end in a sense. It's not even a destination. It's just a means of getting to it's a means to an end. So what you've got to figure out is what is the customer actually trying to do? Because I am fundamentally redesigning the way I do that. Nobody buys music. I subscribe. Nobody buys videos. I subscribe. Nobody's buying books. I subscribe. Nobody's buying newspapers. I subscribe. Nobody's buying magazines. I subscribe. And in the future, no one's going to buy cars. They're going to subscribe. Today you call it Uber. In the future, we'll call it something else. Right? The average car, my car, is 6 years old, 7 years old. I've owned my car for 40,000 hours. Now, I know that's a weird thing to do, to go sit down and calculate how many hours you've owned a car. But it was relevant because my car also keeps a log of how many hours the engine's been running. And my car's been running for about 2,000 hours since I bought it. 2,000, I've owned this car for 40,000 hours. The engine's only been running for 2. In other words, my utilization rate of my car is 5%. So I have a 95% wastage factor on my car. The dumbest thing in the world is to buy something that you're only going to use for 5% of the time. Now, every man in the room is saying, yes, 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 but I have a drilling machine that I use every weekend. And they're lying. Because drilling machines also shouldn't be bought. People go out and buy a 2.5-inch drill bit. Why do you need this? I've got to make a hole. And what are you going to do with that bit afterwards? I don't know. I'll put it in my box and I'm sure I'll use it again. 20 years later, it's still there. So the utilization rate of cars is like a 2.5-inch drill bit. You buy this thing and you keep it, and actually your utilization rate is shockingly bad. So what's starting to happen is we're looking at atoms, and we're starting to say, actually, buying things for ownership is dumb. It makes far more sense to pay for it as you go. So pay-as-you-go, subscription models, this is fundamentally changing payments. Right? Because it means that what's going to happen in the future is you're going to have a dramatic increase in the number of really small payments being made regularly, and in some cases automatically. And very often it's going to be a subscription. And how do you do a subscription, right, if you don't have, it's like a debit order, but if you have a varying debit order, if you have a varying debit card number like I do, then every month it fails. Every month my debit order fails because, oh, you changed your card number. All right? So eventually what I had to do for my Formula One subscription is I had to pay for the entire year. For my LinkedIn subscription, I pay for the entire year because every month it comes back and hits me because I'm not using one-time card numbers on the internet because I'm not stupid. And I also got hacked, which is embarrassing given what I do for a living. And so basically what I realized is actually the only way I could solve this problem, because the banking industry hasn't figured out what's happening in the world, what should exist is a banking card number that evolves where you know I'm going to be making a subscription and you come up with a system where we can have a varying card number that pays my subscription without me having to pay for the entire year, which is the only way to do it today, without a debit order. And so the whole world's moving this way towards subscriptions. And as we move away from free Facebook, free Twitter, etc., we're going to start paying for Facebook, because the counterpoint to Facebook is it's free if you're happy for me to use your data. If you're not happy for me to use your data, you're going to have to pay. And I think many of us are very uncomfortable, not with the fact that we use our data, but the way in which our data is being used. So many of us are going to say, you know what, I'll pay you. Just leave my data out. And if that's where we're going to go, there's going to be an explosion in the number of services we choose to subscribe to with microtransactions. So folks, what we need to understand is that we are in the business of wheel nuts, right? If you want to sell more wheel nuts, you're going to sell more cars. It's about commerce, it's not about payments. So customer centricity is key. Now, I'm going to show you a quick case study. And so the case study, just to demonstrate this to you, is this. Now, when this happened, I remember I was quite shocked. I went away and I thought, why the heck would PayPal be in late-stage talks to buy Pinterest? And the shares of PayPal went up, but the shares of Pinterest went up, and the shares of PayPal went down when this happened. And the reason for this is PayPal was very aware of what's happening in commerce. PayPal's a payment company. Why is a payment company buying a social media company? And what PayPal realized is that what's starting to happen is a couple of things. Firstly, the way that we discover things, the way we evaluate things, the way we make decisions to buy things, the way we buy things, the way we decide to buy things, the way we purchase it, complete the purchase, the way we receive the product, and the way we use the product, and maybe even the servicing that happens afterwards, is all being decoupled. Previously, you'd watch it on TV, you'd become aware of something, you'd go to a mall, you'd walk around, you'd evaluate things. Today, that's not how it happens. Everything's been unbundled. And I'm going to skip forward in my slide a little bit and share this with you. So the way that this suit, for example, my daughter buys my clothes, as you can see. And so my daughter would watch some Instagrammer and he'd be dancing, and the Instagrammer was clickable. That's a new adjective, clickable. And so you click on it, and it says, well, everything that this guy is wearing is not just clickable. Here's another adjective. It's shoppable. It's shoppable. Clickable and shoppable. So in other words, if I click on it, I get sizes, I get colors, I get availability. If I can then click on the thing I want to buy, it says, yeah, we've got your size, it's available, I can get it to you in 8 hours, it's going to cost you this. With delivery, one click to pay. Do you want to buy it? Add to cart. Check out. Now, you've just done this on Instagram. Right? So this is ambush marketing. Ambush marketing is I wasn't actually going to buy something, but I am going to buy it. Now, this fundamentally changes the payment journey. It changes the purchasing journey, but importantly, it's a huge impact on the payment journey. Now, you're going to look at this and go, well, yeah, but this is Instagram. But let's go back and because of this, because of what's happening with Instagram and Facebook and Apple and all of the social media are suddenly moving and turning into shopping. As they turn into shopping, well, where does this leave the payment players? Right? Because the payment players are cut out of this. Because here's the point, you see, is that Instagram is making money. Pinterest is making, well, Instagram in this case, Instagram is making money on the payment transaction. They're making a turn on the purchase price. They're making a margin, because if you're a shop, you're making a percentage on the thing you're buying. So if I pay for an Audi, let's say you buy an Audi for R1 million and you put it on your credit card, let's say, right? You'll make a small fee on the payment, but you're not going to make a commission on the car. But Instagram makes both. Instagram makes that small percentage of the payment, and they make a turn on the price of the car. Well, now this fundamentally changes payment, because we're saying, well, hang on, actually, there's far more money to be made on margin on the product than there is to be made on the service charge. Well, this is happening in multiple industries. And the third thing that's happening is Instagram is getting this amazing data on the customer. In fact, if you look at Pinterest in this case, Pinterest is a data-driven decision-making business. They are hugely based on sucking up data and basically designing entire strategies around that data, which you as a payment provider are never going to get. So in the long run, you as a payment provider are going to have a real problem, because the guys in commerce are getting all the data, you're getting nothing. Right? So you just see a store of value being requested to send money to something else. You don't even know what's being bought, who bought it, what journey you took, who you are, anything about your demographics, your behavior, your psychographic. We know nothing about you. We can't make any prediction about what you're likely to want or do next, whereas Pinterest has all of that. So basically, if everyone enters payments, then we'll enter social media. That was PayPal's play. Now, the deal didn't go through, and PayPal's share price went up. So I think investors were relieved. But for me, what was really interesting is the thinking that went in, because they went down the road, because really, this was going to be a $45 billion purchase by PayPal. $45 billion. Why would they pay that much? Because Facebook has 6 times as many users as Pinterest, but makes 47 times as much revenue. Why? Because Facebook, you can buy stuff, and Pinterest, you couldn't. It was a payment. You see, there's an enormous difference, purely because the one enables commerce and the other didn't. And PayPal realized that they've got to get into this space. So I think that we've got to start realizing that there's a huge amount of decoupling happening in the world, and what's driving decoupling are these irritating symbols. These are the symbols that are causing decoupling, because basically we are now saying, well, I don't trust your ads anymore. I want to see what other people said. What are their reviews? I want to see what their stars are. I want to see their likes, their shares, who's following you, because that's driving commerce. And this is what you really need to understand, and this is what makes people like Instagram really good at ambush marketing. So what's starting to happen, folks, is the world of payments and the world of commerce are starting to converge, which means that we really need to start understanding how commerce is going, because we need to innovate at this rate. Now, here's the problem. I was sitting at the back listening to the fact that it took 10 years for some of the innovations to happen. By the way, if it takes 10 years, it's not an innovation. And so I'll just tell you, there's a company called Staples. Staples is the South African version of Waltons. You know Waltons, the stationers? In America, Staples launches a new feature every 6 weeks. Every 6 weeks, they're launching a new feature, which sounds impressive, right, for a company that ostensibly is stationary. They are launching something new every 6 weeks. Amazon launches a new feature every 6 seconds. Now, that should be very scary. If it's taking us 10 years to do something that Amazon can do in 6 seconds, this is a serious problem. So we've got to become more agile. We've got to become more customer-centric. The word that the Japanese use is omotenashi. And omotenashi, which is theoretically just, it means hospitality, but it's far more than that. It's a way of life in Japan that basically is focused on providing the best service and hospitality despite receiving nothing in return. It says the customer is not king. The customer is not king. The customer is God. Now, that might be blasphemous, but that's the view in Japan. And here's the thing, folks. That is a comment that actually came from, sorry, I think there was another slide, but never mind. That's a comment that came from the CEO of JCB. Okay? It was the Japanese payment system that actually made that comment and said, we are basically focusing on omotenashi because really we've got to become far more customer-centric in the way that we build payment systems. Which means that we as an industry seriously have to start cooperating, collaborating much better than we have in the past. Now, up to now, we've largely been looking at the left-hand side of this. We've been looking at how can we do the same things a little bit better, and how can we do a few new things. What we haven't been doing enough of, right, is how can we make things that make the old things obsolete. Now, most of what we're doing is actually at the back end. It's at what we call the core, or the performance engine of the payment systems. We are working there. What we need to start realizing is actually the front end is where a lot of the innovation is happening, the edge. It's what we call the edge. That's where a lot of the changes are happening, and that's where the disruption is going to come from. And some of the things we do here are going to make some of the things there obsolete. So if this great futurist once said, there's nothing more useless than doing better something that shouldn't be done at all. Now, why is that important? It's important because guess who's coming after you? Right? This is Amazon. And you can see that Amazon is at war with everyone. So Amazon started off selling books. Then they said, I'm selling books, why don't I do audiobooks? No, why don't I do digital books? Why don't I do Kindle? I'm doing Kindle, why don't I do audiobooks? I'm doing audiobooks, I'm transmitting sound, why don't I do music? I'm transmitting music, why don't I do Movies. I'm doing movies. Why don't I do movie reviews? I'm doing movie reviews. Why don't I do gaming? Why don't I do game reviews? Why don't I allow you to watch gaming live? How are you paying for this? I'll just launch Amazon Pay. How do I get into your house? Because I'm doing audio anyway. Oh, I'll put Alexa into your house. Okay. But you want to run a business? Why don't I do the logistics for you? Right? So now I'll do the logistics for you. And, but you're trying to build a website and you're trying to develop new software. Well, why don't you use AWS? Then they went out and bought Whole Foods. That's a retailer for foods. Then they went out and bought Medical One. And Medical One is an online pharmacy. So you can see where Amazon is going. Amazon's got 300 million customers. Basically, Amazon has said, I'm not trying to own the market. I just want to own the 80% of the market that has money. And Apple's strategy is exactly the same. Apple's market share, globally, is 2% lower than Samsung's market share. Apple's revenue market share is about 15% higher than Samsung's market share. Apple's profit market share is 60% higher than Samsung's market share. In fact, Apple makes 80% of all the profit in the entire cell phone industry. Why? Because they only sell to rich people. Which makes sense. So the point I'm making, folks, is payments. The payment industry is going to follow commerce. And so we need to understand that what Amazon is doing is Amazon is starting out by saying, I'm going to build an ecosystem, but it's my ecosystem. I am now doing issuing. I am now doing acquiring. I am now doing settlement. It's me on me. Right? It's not me on them. It's not us on them. It's not them on us. It's us on us. And this is Morgan. This is Chase for Business, sorry. Chase for Business. Everything that Chase for Business does, Amazon does. Amazon doesn't have a banking license. What it has instead is a pet bank. So I always think of them as Bond villains. With the little, I don't know, it used to be Bank of Athens, then it was Ubank, right? Do you remember those little banks? We'll let anyone partner with us, right? Of course, you're welcome to come into the payment system through me. Just keep stroking me. And so that's exactly what Amazon does. Go and look at every country where Amazon's gone. They found a small bank, normally the smallest bank, who's trying to grow aggressively, young CEO. I'm going to go into this. Damn the risks. Ignore the torpedoes, full speed ahead. And so the problem that you've got is Amazon's got an easy way into this. Whether you change the rules or not, they're going to get into this thing. And who's going to let them in? You are. Right? So the problem that we've got, folks, is that the payment industry is changing. Why is Amazon doing this? They're not interested in. You think they're interested in the revenue out of payments? They don't care about the revenue out of payments. They're interested in the revenue they're going to get from the information, from lending, and the margin they're going to get from the things that they're selling, plus the subscriptions and all the services. That's where they're going. And right now, what's the biggest hindrance? The biggest hindrance in Amazon's life is payments. They need to fix this problem. So they're getting into the industry not because of the profits, but in spite of the profits. They don't really care about these profits. They need to get the friction out of this. So the problem we've got is this is what we look like. And this is hugely complex. And Amazon's looking at this going, wow, this is very complicated. We've got to figure out a way to fix this. And the problem gets even worse when you start looking at the value chain, you look at the number of players, it's fragmented. This is why I said it looks like a cyber informal settlement. Right? And so you can't integrate this thing because it's just so complicated. Amazon looks at this and says, screw this, I'm going to build my own thing. So really, the challenge you have is that hyper-collaboration is the future, because I can tell you now, I was involved in building a very big system. Are there any Americans in the room? Am I allowed to say this? I was involved in building a very big, South Africa, I can say this, in Iran. Because the biggest telco in Iran is actually empty. I can't say that in America. The biggest telco in Iran is actually a South African company called MTN. And I was the chief digital officer. We launched a taxi app called Snap. Eventually, we became the third biggest ride-hailing app in the world. Was owned by MTN in Iran. Then we launched Snap Pay. Then we launched Snap Groceries. Then we launched Snap Hotels. Then we launched Snap Box. Then we launched Snap Flights. Then you can see where I'm going with this. And so what started to happen is we gradually started adding more and more. Eventually, we had our own ecosystem, and every payment was us on us. Every payment was us on us. And we owned everything. And that's where we see this going. So really what we need to do, folks, in closing, is we need to retain this, right? Cooperation, competition, ownership, mitigating risk, etc., while we do more of this. That's really the challenge that the payment industry has. We really have to keep doing this, but we really need to start embracing this in a bigger way. And the challenge you have is, you see, if you have no competition and no collaboration, there's no motivation to improve. If you have high competition and low collaboration, you've got lots of duplication of effort and no sharing. If you've got low competition and high collaboration, you've got groupthink. And if you've got too much competition and too much collaboration, you've got collusion. So you want to be in the middle. If you're in the middle, you'll do more knowledge sharing. You'll get the organizational efficiencies right. I mean, how long does it take you to make a decision? Well, it depends on how long we can take to get all the banks together to attend a meeting. So in closing, folks, this is how we work today. Very much organizations like machines. We've got to start thinking of organizations as organisms. We've got to start working more using agile leadership. And we talk about agile, we run our projects with agile, but actually all we're doing is using agile methodology, but we don't have agile structures. So, folks, in closing, I just want to give you the final say. I'm out of time. Is really we need to be in the top right-hand corner. We need to kind of say we need speed and creativity, and we need scale and productivity. We need to be up there. We need to be able to discover and reinvent stuff and put it into production very quickly. And in some cases, we're going to make mistakes, but it's the only way that we can really meet the challenges of the future, is by working in this ambidextrous way where we value stability, we value resilience, we value compliance, but we value innovation, we value change, we value agility more. It's not either or, it's both and. Thank you very much.